So today we're going to talk about first principles thinking and how to practice first principles thinking method. And if you understand this key concept, you will have a huge unfair advantage on how you approach problems, because with this method you can solve any problem, may it be your work, business, health, or anything. And if you watch towards the end of this video, you'll know exactly why renowned thinkers, whether it be Aristotle or Elon Musk, who have adopted this kind of thinking, will have a huge advantage when it comes to solving problems, whereas those who don't do this will seriously lose out. Okay, so let's dive in. But first, let's define what is a first principle. We could think of a Lego house, and a Lego house didn't just exist as a Lego house, right? It was built using these building blocks of squares and rectangles that you put together so that you can make a Lego house. So, a first principle could be described as basic, the most basic form, the purest, the simplest, the most fundamental, and it's kind of indivisible. It's like you have narrowed down the most basic form of a thing, and for this case, it's a Lego house. So now we have an idea of what a first principle is. How can you know if a statement is a first principle? Let's say we have statement X. Statement X, can we break it down further? If yes, then ask a question to further break it down. And then we answer the question. And the answer to that question now becomes statement X. So we repeat that until such time that we reach the point where we cannot break it down to its simpler form. And that's when you know it's a first principle. So for example, I have a statement, I want more money. Can we further break it down? So I think yes, because it appears superficial, right? And we could ask, why do you want more money? Then I could answer, I want to quit my job. And now that statement, I want to quit my job, becomes our new statement in its simpler form. Then we further break it down by asking another question, why do you want to quit your job? That could be answered by, I want to travel the world. And now that's our next statement. And I think we can still further break it down by asking why. Why do you want to travel the world? I could answer by, I feel free when I travel. And for the sake of example, let's stop here and pretend that there's no simpler form of this. So we could say that this is a key principle. This is one of the most fundamental truth about me. It's I feel free when I travel. So you can follow that diagram if you want to know if a certain thing is a first principle or not. Now let's dive into the star of the show. What is really first principles thinking? Well, I can summarize that with this. It's never assume. Okay, first principles thinking narrows down the truth within something and not the assumptions. So if you can take something from this video, it's never assuming for first principles thinking. Okay, so it's like this. We have assumptions about certain things, then we drill them down to its most fundamental truth, aka first principles. And then we have these first principles. And from there, we form our own deduction. So let's say earlier, we had the assumption that I want more money. I drilled it down to I feel free when I travel. That's what I really mean when I say I want more money. And from that, we can deduce that what I really want is freedom and not more money. That's how we deduce from the first principles. So as you can see, the assumption is somewhat not equal to our deduction, right? The deduction appears to be more in depth and logical. So now let's apply that simple pattern in a riddle. So we have this problem. In 1990, a person is 15 years old. In 1995, that same person is 10 years old. And how can this be? So we will have 3 steps to apply first principles thinking on this. Step number 1. Identify and define your current assumptions. For this problem, our current assumptions are, given the timeline, at 1990, well, the person was 15 years old. And at 1995, 5 years after 1990, we assume that that person should be 20 years old, right? So that's our assumption. Step number 2, let's break down the problem into its fundamental principles. And how do we do that? It's by questioning your assumptions. So for this case, we had this assumption. We could say that, oh, that person should be 20 years old by 1995 and not 10 years old. Or we could ask ourselves, is that person aging backwards? Well, no. No person is aging backwards, right? How about 1995 is earlier than 1990? Well, you know what? That's kind of possible. And how? If it's before Christ, aka BC. So that could be something. So we know that in BC, 1995 is earlier than 1990. So we questioned that assumption. We had that fundamental principle. Step number 3, create new solutions from scratch. So from our first principle that we defined in step 2, we can now solve the problem, right? Well, if it's BC, 1995 BC, the person is 10 years old, and 1990 BC, that's later than 1995 BC, it's logical that the person would be 15 years old, right? And that means the person was born at 2005 BC. Problem solved. So just for the sake of practice, let's try this one more simple problem. So a murderer is condemned to death. He has to choose between 3 rooms. The first is full of raging fires, the second is full of assassins with loaded guns, and the third is full of lions that haven't eaten for 3 years. Which room is safest for him? Is there? So let's go through our 3 steps. Number 1, current assumptions. Current assumption is we have 3 rooms, fire, assassin with loaded gun, and lions. So for room 1, we assume that the person will get burned, so probably it's not safe. He will die. And the second one, he will get shot, so probably he would be killed in there. And last one, he will be eaten by the lions in the third room. So those are our current assumptions. Next stop for step number 2, let's define the fundamental principles by questioning our assumptions. So we could say that she's prison the prisoner will be probably killed in all these three rooms. Or or we could ask ourselves, he could escape the fire? Probably no. Or he could dodge the bullets? Probably no. Or the lions will not eat him? Well, that's possible. But how? If the lions are not hungry? And that will only happen if they are dead. Right? So let's take this principle that the lions cannot eat the murderer if they are dead. So now let's jump to step 3 for the solutions. And let's use this first principle. Room 3 is probably the safest because lions that haven't eaten in 3 years, which was said in the problem, are dead. Problem solved. Okay, I hope you enjoyed those two simple problems wherein we practiced first principles thinking. But now let's talk about the real stuff and how this could be powerful in real life. Let's talk about Elon Musk. Elon Musk has a dream of making space travel possible for everyone. But there's one problem. It's that spaceship battery packs are expensive. And so he applied this first principles thinking method to solve his problem. Number 1, current assumptions. Battery packs are expensive. These are Elon's words. Battery packs are really expensive, and that's just the way they will always be. Historically, it has cost $600 per kilowatt hour, and it's not going to be much better than that in the future. So, that's the assumption. We jump into questioning it to get the fundamental principles and say, or battery materials could be inexpensive. We could ask ourselves, what are the material constituents of the batteries? These are what Elon Musk asked himself of while solving this problem. And the answer was it's got cobalt, nickel, aluminum, carbon, some polymers for separation, and the silicon. And that's a fundamental principle here. And we can devise a solution based on this. So Elon said, if we bought that on the London Metal Exchange, what would each of those things cost? And the answer, it's like $80 per kilowatt hour from $600. So he cut the cost more than 50%, right? And by applying this first principles thinking, Elon had built SpaceX, aiming to make space travel possible for everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video as I have enjoyed making it for you. And make sure you let me know in the comments below what your biggest takeaway was. And make sure you subscribe to the channel. And the channel is entirely about leveraging this first principles thinking method and applying it to our life, our real life problems. So make sure you subscribe for future videos like this one. So if you like this video regarding solving problems using first principles thinking, I would like to share with you about this book that I just released, and it's called What's Your Optimal Eating Pattern? It's about answering that question using this first principles thinking. So if you'd like a copy of this book, details are below in the description box. And if you'd like a copy, just go there, and you're up for a huge bonus if you'll go to the site, and you'll learn a lot of things there. It will help you create your own health strategies or solutions based on this first principles thinking method. And by that, you will not become an easy prey for fad diets that come along. So I'm excited. Please, if you'd like a copy of the book, link is in the description box below. And I will see you on the other side.